I'm pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Professor Tibor Machan. Professor Machan has lived in the United States since 1956, 3 years after his father arranged for him to be smuggled out of Hungary at the age of 14. During these 3 years, he lived in Germany and attended school in Munich. Professor Machan had an illustrious career, to say at least. He has been on the faculty of the universities of California, New York, Auburn, and Adelphi. Currently, he holds the R.C. Hawes Chair in Business Ethics at Chapman University in Orange, California. Professor Machan is the author of more than 30 books, has edited another 17, and has written more than 100 professional papers. His most recently published books are Libertarianism Defended and Morality of Business, The Profession for Human Welfare. Usually his work focuses on political philosophy and epistemology. Professor Machan's talk today is titled Human Rights Issues in Germany. He will argue that Germany needs to begin to emphasize individual rights in the tradition of John Locke and Thomas Jefferson. In his opinion, this tradition most fully expresses the idea of sovereignty of the human individual and is the mark of justice in human community life. Professor Machan holds that Germany is far from having attained this kind of polity. At the end of his talk, there will be enough time for a hopefully lively discussion. After the discussion, there will be a dinner at the Beer Brezel. You will find a map on the board. You are all invited to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Machan from Chapman University.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your coming. Some of you have suffered through me for 2 days, and you are still coming back of your own volition, which is, I think, highly commendable, especially for a libertarian, that nobody is forcing you to be here or even bribing you to be here, which is really quite exceptional. I am very familiar with giving lectures at innumerable universities throughout the United States, Latin America, in New Zealand, in South Africa, and so on, and I know that it is very difficult to get together people who are constantly engaged in preparing for tests and preparing papers for some extracurricular brainstorming. So I really do appreciate your making the effort to check me out here. Let me begin by saying that I'm a little bit reluctant to follow the title of this talk, because why focus on Germany? And it's not like Germany is very special in this respect. It has had some major clashes with human rights during the 20th century, as we all know, but at this particular time, it's pretty much the same as would be Sweden or Italy or Holland or Australia or New Zealand, and whatever abuses occur in the country of human rights occur in almost every other society, and some places much more severely than here. The stress for someone like myself who takes individual human rights very seriously is to make clear that no matter where you live, as long as you live in a human community, the sovereignty of the individual, which is circumscribed by his or her rights, it ought to be respected, and that officialdom ought to protect that sovereignty and not to encroach upon individual liberty, that is simply expressing things, however controversially, but peacefully. And this is where I want to begin, because although there are many other areas of life where human rights are important and are subject to abuse, One area, especially in Germany and recently in Austria, is where people express controversial views that are offensive and upsetting to many people, especially in the light of recent history. Thus, for example, Holocaust denial is illegal in many countries, including in Germany, and people sometimes are subjected to criminal sanctions for simply speaking their minds. However perverse that may be, however corrupt their minds may be, it's only speaking your mind. As the old saying goes, in America, sticks and stones may hurt your bones, but words you can always walk away from. And you can walk away from books, you can walk away from movies and art shows and so on. And while these can be upsetting, and they often are precisely meant to be upsetting, they are not a form of aggression against human beings. Now that can be extended to other areas besides expressing ideas, writing them down, advocating them, propagating them. Where in Germany, for example, there are quite a few laws that explicitly ban the propagation of offensive ideas. Ideas that I will grant, and almost anyone with my position will grant, are objectively objectionable. They're not just subjectively objectionable. It's not like something that you don't like because you have a certain taste or a certain preference. In my case, for example, if you don't love orange, this would very much upset me, but this is not an objective problem. This is a purely subjective issue of Tibor Macan's color tastes. We're not talking about things like that. We're talking about expressions of ideas, of thoughts, of plans, of hopes that truly are demonstrably offensive, demonstrably wrong, demonstrably, you might call them corrupt. But it's another thing to talk about them as if they were aggressive. It's one thing to think of an idea as false, as obscene, as corrupt, as in many ways failing as an idea that might help human beings cope with the world successfully. It's another thing to call them also aggressive. Ideas can't be aggressive except in very rare circumstances where you are in a context where the idea functions as an incitement to action, and people are so prepped to behave in certain ways that the only thing that they need is that little idea to get them moving in an aggressive direction. But in most cases, even the most offensive propaganda doesn't do that. It simply expresses some unity or some solidarity between a bunch of people who think badly. And that in a tradition of individual rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the kind of thing that the Declaration of Independence of the United States expresses so succinctly, guided by the philosophy of John Locke and Montesquieu and some other classical liberals. That sort of thing is supposed to be something that an individual should be free to do and not limited in doing. There are quite a few examples of these sorts of abuses in the German legal tradition, although again, I want to re-emphasize that I just happen to be focusing on the German case because I'm in Germany and because I was invited by Germans to talk about this thing. But I could be going to Denmark or Norway or Sweden or Poland or anywhere else, and there would probably be just as many, if not often more,